Hello, I'm Joel Hargis. I'm with the Florida Aviation Network, and you're watching Plane Time. I am not Ben Coleman. Ben is, well, he's flying around the country somewhere today and couldn't be here to host the show, and so I got the honor to host today. Today, we're actually focused on airplane maintenance, and this is actually sponsored by the FAST team, the FAA FAST team, and you can get wing credits for watching the show. There will be a code at the end of the show, so when it ends up, get your pen and pencil ready, use that credit. The information on how to apply for those credits will be on the air. So, as I said, we're going to talk about airplane maintenance today, and my host for this segment is Arnold Holmes. Arnold Holmes is a DAR, which is a designated aircraft representative?
Designated airworthiness representative.
See, screwed that up. Airworthiness representative. And so actually DARs perform a vital function in conjunction with the FAA, right?
They do.
And you don't work for the FAA.
I do not. I'm merely a representative. A designee is a person who can do inspections, testing, and issue certificates on behalf of the FAA. So we're civilians. We don't work for the FAA. We're not paid by the FAA. We're not, if we were to be sued for some reason, we're not represented by the FAA. So we act as independent contractors, if you will, or private citizens. A good DAR will work underneath an LLC or a S corp or something like that for a little bit of protection. But we have no connection with the FAA besides having the authority to issue certificates, do testing or inspection on their behalf.
So, and it's like I say, I've never built an airplane. I've never had to do a major restoration, and so the FAA, I think one of the reasons they have DARs is because they just can't staff up to do all those inspections.
The FAA is chronically overworked and I think understaffed, and they have a lot of very, very technical things that they do. And so what they do is they leverage private citizens with industry experience to help them get things done, right? So it wouldn't be uncommon right now for you to call a FSDO and ask for, and we'll cover a broad spectrum of things, but you had mentioned building an airplane. You might call today the FSDO and they might say, we're happy to come out. However, due to our workload, we may not be able to get there for 2 months or 3 months or 4 months, just depending on the workload. Well, of course, somebody has spent 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years building their airplane. It's done. They don't want to wait.
Just for somebody to look at it.
Right. So that is one particular area where DAR really works out well, because in 99% of the time, DAR can react quickly. You can call, you can set an appointment. After you get done with some paperwork, they can be out there relatively quick.
So, I know you're an AP.
Correct.
And an IA.
Correct.
Right? And so to be a designee, if you will, airworthiness representative, there's obviously, you got to go through a list of qualifications.
Sure.
So tell us, how anybody needing an inspection will feel comfortable with the DAR based on the prerequisites.
Well,
how's that all work?
Yeah, we'll kind of back the conversation up a little bit and talk about what it takes first to become a designee.
Yeah.
So there's obviously 2 routes, and traditionally, and I'll refer to sort of the old days, it was common that an FAA inspector who had worked for the FAA for many years may retire and become a DAR because they had a lot of that experience built into them from working for the FAA. You can also become a DAR as a private citizen based on your resume. Now, you can have a great resume and still not be taken on as a designee, because part of becoming a designee is the FAA has to have the need and the ability to manage, meaning they have to have the resources to manage you as an additional person that they're, have oversight on. So you may be like completely an amazing general aviation mechanic, and you could fit a really good role as a designee in the general aviation area. But if they need somebody for airline stuff, and you've applied to be a designee and gone through that whole thing, but here's your skill set, but they really need a skill set over here, you're not going to get picked up, right?
So, you can't know everything about every airplane.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
That's impossible.
Correct.
And so, do they they certify you in particular categories?
So
how does that work?
when you go through the application process, you're going to go to a website called DMS, Designee Management System. You're going to make an application on there, which is going to go to your local office, whether it be the FSDO or the MIDO, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And you're going to go through this application process, and when they finally get through with you and they designate you, they're also going to give you what's called function codes. Those function codes delineate what you're allowed to do, what type of activity.
Oh, okay.
So you may only have one function code that allows you to do, say, experimental amateur-built aircraft, propeller-driven only, or you may have a whole slew of function codes that allows you to do, helicopters, gyrocopters, amateur-built, standard category, meaning like, Cessnas, Pipers, that kind of thing, aircraft with type certificates. You could have function codes for special flight permits that would allow you to do ferry permits for people, or field approvals, or 8130-3 yellow tags. So there's a very, very wide scope of activity that's possible, and a lot of it's based on your resume and the training you get once you join as a designee. There's a variety of different training opportunities you have that will qualify you to gain more function codes. So the more function codes you have, the more work you can do, the more money you can make.
And so, you talked about the FSDO and the MIDO, and gosh, I remember when I first started flying, people were, "Oh, you got to talk to the FSDO or FSDO."
Sure.
What does that stand for?
Well, the FSDO is the Flight Standards District Office. Most people in aviation are familiar with the FSDO, or at least they've heard of it. If you've gotten a letter in the mail that's stamped FSDO,
Yeah.
you definitely know.
Not good.
Yeah, usually that's not good.
Yeah.
But so the Flight Standards District Office, and there's another office that's called the MIDO. That's the Manufacturing Inspection District Office.
Okay.
There's not quite as many of those as there are FSDOs. There's more FSDOs than MIDOs. However, there's a key distinction. With the MIDO is concerned with original certification. So if it's the first time a product or article is getting certified, or if there's a new manufacturer coming online and needs a product approval certification, or anytime it's a new certification, that's going to be the MIDO.
Okay.
All right? Now, any activity or action that happens after original certification is generally the purview of the FSDO.
Such as?
A renewal of a certificate, an amended certificate, a replacement, an exchange, a special flight permit for like a ferry flight, right? Because if you're going to we're going to issue you a special airworthiness certificate to do, say, a ferry flight, that's not an original certification, it's a recurrent, because the aircraft already holds an airworthiness certificate. So it would be a recurrent, which falls under the FSDO. It's any activity that happens after original certification. I'm being a little general, but that's generally the purview, the difference between the MIDO and the FSDO.
Okay.
The FSDO is also all about airman certification. So as an airman, if you're doing something for, say, a pilot's license, you're not going to talk to the MIDO. It's always going to be the FSDO. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So, and so one of the things that we're trying to do today is clarify this for people, and hopefully we're going to put something, in the bank, so to speak. This will all be posted online to eternity, so that people can use it for a reference.
Sure.
And so, it's complicated. So, you're contacted by the aircraft owner.
I'll refer to him as applicant because it doesn't necessarily need to be the owner. It can be the owner, it can be an agent of the owner. There's a variety of different ways that someone can make an application for some type of certificate activity.
Okay.
In this case.
And so how do they find you?
Well, the FAA does have a page called Find a Designee. So there's lots of different designees, and to kind of come back to that a little bit, as far as what a designee is and why they exist, we talked about that it's an opportunity for the FAA to leverage resources, right?
Right.
So about 1927, give or take, is when private citizens started doing this with the FAA. And that's through the course of time, there's been...
What year did you say?
1927.
That's a long time.
Yeah, 1927 is when private citizens started helping the FAA in this capacity. The framework has gently changed and been modified and molded, and even I think it was in the either the late 60s or early 70s, Congress even came in and said, are we sure this is what we want to do? Do we want, you know, the fox garden, the hen house, so to speak? But
right.
they eventually put together a really good framework, and we now have a document which is FAA Order 8000.95, which was put in place in 2014, which really solidifies how this entire system works, how people are designated, how they're managed, what they're allowed to do. I mean, it really put a complete framework in place. But it's been since 1927 that this situation has occurred, that people could be a designee.
Right.
Right. So there's lots of different designees. I'm an airworthiness designee, but there's engineering guys, there's medical guys, your designated medical examiner.
Oh, right.
Your
okay.
Right. So
right.
So
I get it. Yeah.
You got your DPEs, your designated pod examiners. Another DME is a mechanics examiner. So all these people are designees. If you see a D, they're generally a designee. They're a private citizen that's allowed to act on behalf of the FAA. Now, if you want to find a designee, there's a couple different ways that typically happens. You can go to the FAA website and do a little search for find a designee, and a page will come up, and there's various search boxes and selections that you can make.
Yeah, I would think you need it specific to your aircraft.
Or if you're looking for a DME or a DPE or anything else, you can
or a search them out there.
It gives you the ability to search all the different types of designees. And it's very helpful if you know what function code, we talked about function codes a few minutes ago. It's helpful in that search if you know what function code you're looking for. It helps the system find a little bit better. And you can go to FAA Order 8000.95, and there's a list of function codes in there that can help you figure out.
And that's all on FAA.gov?
Oh, sure. Every FAA order is on FAA.gov. You can, on the FAA website, all free, all PDFs, you can find everything you want. There's actually the Find a Designee is only on the FAA website. There is another website that I like to heavily promote called DRS, and that's relatively new. It stands for the Dynamic Regulatory System, and this is a website that has been created to try and bring a lot of the FAA information together, meaning FAA orders, federal aviation regulations.
So we got it pulled up over there.
Yeah,
Does that look right?
Yep, that looks right. And I encourage any applicant to go take a look at this, because if you look on when you pull this up, and it's drs.faa.gov, if I remember correctly, but you'll look on the left side of the screen, and you've got those little drop-down arrows, and if you were to click on, say, regulations, it would open up and give you some opportunities to search for federal aviation regulations. Down below that, you see orders, notices, technical standard orders, that kind of thing. What the FAA has done is tried to bring all of that data together so that you can find it in one website, because prior to DRS, we had Electronic Code of Federal Regulations over here, ECFR was over here, and technical standards were over here, and FAA orders were over there, and advisory circulars were over here. So now they've tried to couple that all together. And so if you're an applicant...
So that's
huge.
Again, so fellas, if you could put that web address up again, just that seems super powerful. And there you go, FAA Dynamic Regulatory System. drs.faa.gov.
Highly encourage people to use that.
Right?
Yeah, if you're applying for anything, if you're applying for a special airworthiness certificate for experimental amateur built, you're going to be able to find documents in it that'll help you. If you're needing a standard airworthiness certificate, documents are going to be in there to help you. And the more homework you do, the smoother this process will go, right?
So and as you go in there and look, is geographically part of that search?
Oh, sure, yeah. You can do an individual designee if you know the name. You can do a location search if you're in a particular location, and then you select what type of designee, you select what kind of function code, and you hit the button, and it may give you nothing or it may give you a long list, and you can just start calling people or emailing, because it'll give the person's name, what their qualifications are as far as function codes, an email address and a phone number, and I think it's got a column that says who they're attached to as far as, can't remember if that's right or wrong with FSDO or MIDO, but anyhow, it gives you enough contact information that you're able to reach out to that person.
Cool.
Now,
what's the farthest you've ever gone to do an inspection?
Denver, Colorado. That's the farthest I've gone. I've done Long Island, I've done Denver, Colorado, I've done most of the southeastern states, because we don't really have any geographic restrictions anymore. And in the past, there were geographic restrictions, meaning if you wanted to go out of your area, you had to ask permission. And generally, in most cases, that wasn't too much of a problem, but it was a step that we had to go through. They got rid of geographic expansion requests with the MIDO I don't know, some number of years ago, few years ago, I don't remember exactly when, and more recently with the FSDO. So now we can kind of roam wherever we want to roam without too much problem. We don't go international generally. There are international DARs, for instance, and we get this frequently. People will call from Europe and want you to come over to, Hungary or Poland or wherever and say, I have this Cessna 500 series jet that I need a ferry permit to get back to the United States. There are international DARs in Europe that they want to have handle that. DARs used to go overseas more. It seems to be that the international field offices are allowing that less these days. So I haven't had an opportunity to go overseas or South America, and probably I got enough going on right here. So I have enough going on right here, so I'm not sure that I really need to do that, although it'd be a lot of fun.
So we talked prior to airing here about several different things, and you just blow me away with your knowledge. You rattle off numbers and acronyms.
Well, look, we all know the federal aviation regulations are vast, and no matter what I say, and I think I know, sooner or later somebody's going to type in a question or something and say, no, it's the other FAR. It's impossible to remember them all. It's impossible to remember all the advisory circulars, all the FARs, all the orders, and all that. So I always tend to speak in general terms unless I have the document in front of me.
Wise. So let me ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Right? So one of the things you do is you issue certificates, and there's standard airworthiness certificates, and then there's special airworthiness certificates.
It's easy for you to say.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. And I'm doing that. That's what my job is.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Standard airworthiness certificate is going to be what's called an FAA Form 8100-2. That's your airworthiness certificate. If you have a type certified airplane in the normal, utility, commuter, acrobatic, special.
So in GA terms, that's a Piper, a Cessna.
It's generally speaking, any aircraft that has a type certificate. The FAA has issued a type certificate for that airplane. Generally, that's going to be a standard airworthiness certificate. And now it can fall under a number of categories. As I was mentioning, it would be a standard airworthiness certificate, but then it could be in normal category, utility, acrobatic, commuter, and other special classes. Most of what you would see, or most of what our audience would see, would be a normal category. It would be like a Bonanza or a Mooney or things like that. Yeah.
Standard.
That's standard. So
special.
Special.
What makes it special?
Well, what makes it special is, with some exceptions, it doesn't have a type certificate. So when you look at a special, again, it gets down in, it's a special certificate, and then we get down into categories. And then we'll get down into purpose. There's a third line in the special category, but the categories would be things like experimental, research and development. We go experimental first, and then we do limited and restricted. Both of those actually have type certificates, but they're a special case.
Right.
Light sport
is under special.
Under special. Special flight permits, like ferry flights, are under special. They're not, So you have those, and let's take experimental as an example. That's a category, but then you have a purpose below that, and it could be like airplane or helicopter or experimental light sport, operating experimental light sport, that kind of thing. So the Special Airworthiness Certificate is what's known as an FAA Form 8130-7. Historically, those in the know would remember that those are a pink-colored certificate, and they would come with a separate set of operating limitations, 2 documents that you would keep in the airplane. Today, that format has changed. So just a couple years ago, we no longer issue those pink or salmon-colored certificates. Now it's on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and the certificate, which is just black and white, it's got a watermark, the FAA watermark underneath, but the operating limitations are part of that as well. So it's all one document that you must carry in the airplane at all times.
All right, so I'm building an RV-7. I'm not building an RV-7.
You should be.
One airplane's enough.
Yeah.
But building an RV-7, that's going to be an experimental,
amateur-built airplane.
Amateur-built with a special airworthiness.
Correct.
Is that right?
That's correct.
So that's what I go looking for.
Right.
But if I'm building a Sea Ray and it's experimental, It's special, but it could also be light sport.
It would be operating kit built. It would be light sport operating kit built. That would be the purpose. So when you're talking about that particular example, you would buy from the manufacturer a kit that is a carbon copy, essentially, of what they build in the factory. And you have to build it exactly like they build it. All right? It has to be done exactly with no deviations. We'll issue you an experimental certificate, and it will be operating light sport kit built. All right? So now the other side of that coin, as far as light sport is concerned, is that we have special light sport category, which is the factory built version of that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So you have the factory built version. It gets one particular kind of.
It's not experimental?
It's not experimental.
Special.
It's special light sport. It's a special airworthiness certificate, special light
getting
sport.
all this out there? I mean,
it can
a little convoluted.
gets convoluted sometimes. Yeah. So
That's why you're here. That's what you're here. Explain all this to us people that don't.
okay.
I would guess most of the people that go into building an airplane really haven't thought this far ahead.
No, in most cases, unless they've done
Has that
it
been your
before.
experience?
Yeah.
Oh, unless they've done it before.
You know, in past years, these recent past years, we have a lot of repeat builders. There's a lot of people, especially with things like the RV series of aircraft.
Right.
A lot of serial builders. A lot of guys finish and start another one, finish and start another one.
Wow.
They finish it, fly it 40 hours, sell it, start a new one. That's not uncommon. So you do get a handful of people that have been through the ringer before and they know what to do and how to do it, and they've had that experience. But we get plenty of people that have not. And so, you know, you do have to kind of hold their hand a little bit as far as the paperwork, how to submit it, how to do it, you know, and how to make the application and what to expect when I arrive for an inspection, you know, that kind of thing.
Be
So
ready.
we can.
And we're going to deep dive some of that in our second show. But right now I just want to kind of talk about the things you do. And so one of the other things you do is field approvals. What exactly is that about?
Well, a field approval is a pretty unique thing. The FAA did not allow designees to do field approvals until I think 2013 was the first time. I might be off a year or two on that.
Okay.
And last time I checked, which was just a few months ago, I think there was only about 30 people in the United States that were authorized as designees to do field approvals. So,
And so what? Give me an example, because
example would be a lot of aircraft owners are familiar with a product that might be STC, to supplement to the type certificate. You might buy a product, and while it was not part of the original configuration, or
I
part
actually have an STC on my airplane.
Okay, what is your STC?
So I fly a Mooney Eagle, and it's had an STC Screaming Eagle conversion,
Right.
taken from 270 horse to 310 horse.
Right. So when you looked at that original model of aircraft and you looked on the type certificate, the engine that you have, or the turbocharger system, or whatever that's part of that STC, would not have been shown on the original type certificate. A company has developed that and gotten approval from the FAA to sell this kit that allows you to modify the airplane. And so you can buy that right off the showroom floor. You can have it installed by an A&P and have a Form 337 filled out and submit it, and you're good to go. Okay, no problems.
Nice.
Now, if you need to do some type of major repair or major alteration, all right, which your STC was essentially a major alteration, but it's been made available to the masses.
Right.
All right. Now, if you need to do a major repair or a major alteration, as defined in FAR 21.93, you can go there and make a determination on whether what you're needing to do is major or minor. Let's say you need to do a major, but approved data doesn't exist, or not enough approved data exists for you to do that legally. This may be an opportunity for field approval, depending on what it is. So you as an applicant would say, well, you know, I need to do this thing, but I don't have quite enough approved data. I'm going to approach a DAR that can do a field approval, and I'm going to put together a data package. I'm going to submit it, and that DAR is going to work with you to see if this is valid.
Right.
If we need any additional information, it may be something, there are times when that major repair or major alteration may require the aircraft certification office to get involved, which is engineering, basically, the ACO, if it gets really complicated. So essentially what happens is I look at that package, and through a series of events, we decide whether we like it or not. If we like it, I got a stamp that I can stamp that FAA Form 337. Now what you have presented to me is now approved data, and you can go ahead and do that major repair or major alteration.
Still has to be inspected.
Well, I've given you authorization. All right,
To do it.
Let me rephrase that. What you have presented me, I have made approved data. You are now approved to go do that.
Okay.
All right?
You still go look at it?
No, I don't.
Really?
There are times when things have been done where you may go look at it and you can approve it after the fact, but that's not generally how it's supposed to work. How it's supposed to work is you are supposed to get approval first and then do the modification or the
Gotcha.
alteration, repair.
So, so field approval, that's cool. I mean, that's...
It's a steep hill to climb. It's just...
Is it?
Yeah, I mean...
Because basically you're providing the engineering.
Well, I'm not providing the engineering,
not
but...
you.
Yeah.
The applicant.
The thing is for a DAR is that when you put that stamp on there and you sign your name on that as approved data, as an individual, I own that for all history, right? That comes back on me. So
Right.
it's a, you know, we have a regulatory framework that we need to follow, but I as an individual also need to be comfortable with what you're doing is not going to kill somebody,
Right.
is going to be airworthy from here to eternity, has instructions for continued airworthiness, has inspection protocols. You know, there's a whole framework that makes this work.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and so field approval is not just something that we willy-nilly hand out. I mean, I get people call me frequently, hey, I want to put, you know, a complete air conditioning system on this airplane and, you know, STC doesn't exist, so I want to do a field approval. Well, show me what you got. And when I give them the documents, like Advisory Circular 43-210A will give you the basic framework of how to do a field approval. When they read that and then they realize, this ain't as simple as just,
Right.
you know, saying I want to do it.
So, because we're about out of time here, and I want to just, we got about a minute here. Talk to me about special flight permits.
Oh, well, special flight permits can be issued for several.
Ferry permit.
Ferry permit. Well, it's a special flight permit, and it could be issued then for ferrying an aircraft for maintenance or repair. Maybe somebody has, maybe you've gone to the avionics shop to have your panel redone, and in that time, the annual inspection expired. All right. Well, you could get a ferry permit to get it back home.
Right.
You could get a ferry permit to remove aircraft from areas that may be safe for operation, but not technically airworthy, but it's still safe to fly. You could have that, get a ferry permit to move that airplane out because of natural disasters. You would get a special flight permit for aircraft that are attempting to operate overweight.
Yeah, like when guys fly over the ocean, put in a bunch of gas tanks.
Correct, yeah.
That's a good example, is it not?
That's a good example. It's a project that I didn't end up doing, but was looking at a few weeks ago, was a Twin Otter that's going to the Maldives from here in Florida, and they wanted to put 480 gallons of gas in the fuselage, in the main cabin area. And so they needed a variety of things. They needed a field approval for the gas. They needed a ferry permit for overweight. So.
Well, we're out of time, man. We blew through that one.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk a little bit more maybe about some ferry permits and things, but we're down to just a few seconds left. Again, I want everybody to hang on, and there will be a fast code in the credit so you can get wings credits. And I am Joel Hargis with the Florida Aviation Network here on Plane Time.